Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. 8 nighttime fragrances for elegant men. And I'm going to be honest, being elegant was never on my Christmas list when I was younger. I always wanted to play in the NHL. However, you get older, you get wiser, and you learn that making something very difficult look easy is an amazing thing. And whenever I think of that, I always think of someone like Fred Astaire, the great dancer. And dancing is brutally hard on the body. It's one of the most difficult things you can do for yourself physically, and he made it look so easy. Cary Grant made being with ladies and being a movie star, he made that look easy. That's a great thing to be. And the perfect time for being elegant is in the evening. When it's darker out, that's when you're more social. People have a little bit more time. That's when you're with people. Being elegant in that situation is fantastic. These 8 fragrances really embody the elegant nighttime style. Fragrance number 1, this is Boss Ascent Magnetic. Now, this might seem like a strange choice for someone that's railed against the excessive vanilla. However, this fragrance is not for me necessarily. It would be fantastic, though, for a man in his 20s, because this has a very fashionable, sweet feel, a little bit gourmandy, but it is the most, I swear to God, the most powdery fragrance that I have ever worn. And powderiness is definitely elegant when it comes to men. That's one of the successes behind Prada L'Homme is the powdery element, and this is just packed with it. There's a ton of bran in this. That, aside from the maninka fruits, the sweet fruitiness of it, then you've got the bran that gives it a powdery element. But you also have black vanilla husk, which I can only assume, they were very specific. I can only assume that they called it that rather than just straight vanilla, because the husk also has a powdery element. I don't know for sure, but either way, I can assure you, it is phenomenally powdery, very elegant, phenomenal performance. It smells like the elixir, which has done very well in terms of sales and popularity. Very elegant, modern fragrance. Fragrance number 2, this is Noir Extreme by Tom Ford. This is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. It's just outside my top 5, but I love it. It's very sweet, but it's really nicely balanced because the sweetness comes in large part from the creamy kulfi. It's creamy ice cream. There's vanilla as well, but then you've got cardamom and nutmeg. So there's a spicy element that balances out. But the interesting thing about this one, when you compare it to the clone, and this might apply to other people that have clones, because the first hour of this is a little bit different than this. But in this case, I love the first hour of this, and I went looking for it. Why is it different in the first hour? So I'm like, okay, what is it about the opening that I love? It's a bit smoky. It's a bit, has a darker kind of fresh smoky element. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's there. And I'm like, okay, so I'm looking at the notes and I'm like, okay, orange blossom, neroli, and mandarin. That's a citrus element. It has saffron. That's fresh. Yeah, it's fresher. And then I looked up mastic, which is a resin that smells a little bit like turpentine. And I'm like, that's what it is. Now, that doesn't sound appealing, turpentine. But when you mix it with a whole bunch of other things and you just put a hint of that turpentine pungency, it's just fantastic. And that's the kind of detail that you miss when you go to a clone. Not saying this isn't a great clone, because it is. But yeah, it doesn't have the turpentine smell. Fragrance number 3, this is Ombre Noir by Lalique. And I wanted to give noir fragrances kind of right across the spectrum. And what Lalique is really, really good at are woody fragrances. So this is a noir fragrance done in a woodier way, which I think is an elegant way as well. So you do get some sweetness here. There is tonka. There's also some decadent notes. You're going to get tobacco. You're going to get cognac. Cognac is good in this. You're also going to get some other warmth. There's cinnamon. There's some warm resin. So a lot of decadence. You get a powdery fig off the top. Really nicely done fragrance. But remember, it's all in a woody way. So it's going to tone it down a little bit, tone down the sweetness. But it's a lovely fragrance with great performance. Fragrance number 4, this is Regio by Xerjoff. Now, Regio is to people who are in their 60s and 70s as Boss Ascent Magnetic is to people in their 20s. It's elegant, but this one is leaning more old-fashioned, and that's for one reason only, the carnation. Now, this has 4 elements to this fragrance. At least that's my perspective. One of those elements is spiciness, and that is the top element. And that's the thing you pick up the most is the spicy carnation floral feel. It's there. And then you also have a little bit of cardamom. So you put that, and you got the spicy element. But it's not entirely an old school fragrance, because the next thing that I pick up is fruits. There's 5 fruity notes with plum. And plum, to me, in terms of fruity notes, it's the most fruity of the fruity notes. So you really notice the fruity element has vanilla and ambrette, and so it's got a sweet quality as well. So it's not entirely old school, but it is brought back to old school with 2 aromatic notes that are very prominent: geranium, which is green, and lavender, which is herbal. So there's a lot going on, as you can see, in this fragrance, and it's very strong. But yeah, this one definitely, because of the carnation, leans a little older. Next up, Oud Noir by Versace, all-time classic. Really love the way they introduced oud to people in this fragrance. I'm sure they borrowed a little bit from oud wood, but nonetheless, to me, this is a lot of people's starter oud, because they surrounded a dark, heavy note like oud with a ton of freshness. You got 2 different kinds of freshness. You got fresh spicy, because you've got saffron and black pepper. You've also got citrus freshness. You've got orange blossom and neroli, orange and neroli. So you've got that element of freshness as well. You mix it with the oud. It's a fresh, accessible oud. And then the beautiful thing about this is the cardamom, because as the oud dissipates, the cardamom I notice more and more. And when they're in that sort of middle ground where there's a little bit of oud, a little bit of cardamom, it mixes really nicely, turns into a date night fragrance, and then it becomes a real noir fragrance, which is elegant, nighttime oriented, and great performance. Fantastic. Fragrance number 6, this is Parfum de Marly Habdan, a fragrance that's very disrespected, I think, in the fragrance community. If you look at Parfum de Marly, you think of Leighton or Herod, or you think of a new one like Altair, or a fresh one like Sedley. Very rarely do people mention Habdan, but it's a very nice fragrance. And it is similar to an all-time designer classic, which is Noir Ombre by Ismayilov. It's not exactly the same, but it is very similar. So this has apple, and Noir Ombre doesn't. This has saffron, and it's a little bit more toned down than Noir Ombre. And this also is a little darker. It has myrrh, which is a dark resin. It has caramel instead of vanilla, which is a little bit darker sweetness. But yeah, overall, it's still pretty similar, and you can tell I really like it because it's not much left. So great performance. Habdan is great. Next up, we have Club de Nuit Precieux 1 from Armaf, and this is often compared to Absolute Aventus. It's meant to be a clone of that, supposedly. I've also had people mention Hasavat to me. As I've worn it more and more, though, I've noticed something. Now, Absolute Aventus is often called Spicy Aventus. And I mean, I've never tried it, but that makes sense to me if you look at the note breakdown. You know, you got cinnamon and nutmeg. Those are both spicy. Ginger is kind of spicy. And then you've also got cloves. I mean, it's tons of pink pepper too, tons of spiciness, right? And yet there is pink pepper and black pepper in this, but I don't really get spicy Aventus from this. Not that I don't love it, because what I do get is that caramel note, the sweetness. So to me, I would refer to this more as mildly sweet Aventus, and it is my favorite by quite a margin of all the Aventus style fragrances, but I don't think of it, I don't get a lot of black pepper or pink pepper. I really don't think of it as spicy Aventus. I do think this is the best Aventus, at least for me. Finally, we have Givenchy Pie, a fragrance that is reasonably priced compared to some of the other ones on this list. Really nice fragrance that is from the late 90s, and yet it really does fit into the modern nighttime fragrances that are a little bit sweet. It's got a lot of vanilla. It has almond as well. And so, yeah, it is sweet. It's an Alberto Morillas creation. 15, I think it was either 13 or 15 flankers of this. So it's been really, really popular. It's one of the first true gourmands. And yeah, and it's not watered down. So it still has great performance, and yet it's super inexpensive. I think there is only one thing that really may put some people off, in the modern, it's not a big deal to me, but it does have 5 aromatic notes. I don't think you could make a fragrance in the 90s unless you had like herbal notes. I really don't think you could. This has 5 of them, including rosemary and tarragon. But it doesn't come off as herbal to me. It doesn't come off as, I just get it as sort of a darker vanilla, really. That's how it comes across to me anyway. Still has great performance. Underrated fragrance, but definitely nighttime. Anyway, yeah, I'm not into hockey as much anymore, and elegance is a thing. And yeah, I think it's important in the evening. Thanks a lot.